been almost 3 months since the remastered Bioshock collection was released, and I feel like I have to say my piece on the series and finally move on. Aside from a short-lived infatuation with the first game, I can't say I'm much of a fan of the series at all, and this collection reminded me of a few things I've wanted to say for years. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Bioshock is to games what Inception is to films. It's an example of a piece of entertainment trying desperately to be taken seriously. It can still be considered an above-average experience, which is part of a much larger problem in the medium actually, but just as Inception is more challenging than the usual action-adventure guff farted out by Hollywood, it doesn't exactly come close to the mind-melting cerebral fiction people want to believe it is. The shallow way in which Bioshock presents its themes and narrative just feel like adolescent flexing. Of course, 18-year-old me thought it was powerful stuff back then. This wasn't your average shooter. I was playing a smarter game than those dicks playing Halo 3. How I would love to punch me back then. Like so many others, I was tricked by its superficial chin-stroking use of social philosophy and gritty, visceral design. These high ideas are forced to rub shoulders with some standard-issue gory FPS gameplay to create something conflicted, something messy. Most of the story and characterisation is lazily backfilled by dead drop voice recordings, a tedious device which has since been adapted by the whole industry, which are usually picked up and activated just in time to play over a frantic gunfight, becoming simultaneously a distraction from and an underwhelming backing track to constant mindless chaos. The main idea the game has to offer is when you occasionally have to engage with their stupidly reductive morality system, which is easily identified as the cheap emotional manipulation it is. The designers clearly didn't want to punish players too much for making either choice, so neither moral path differs much from the other in terms of gameplay. Eventually it all evens out anyway, or gets close enough that it doesn't really impact the experience at all. So the only way the game actually allows you to engage with the objectivist ideas turns out to be pretty meaningless. It isn't really so much a study of objectivism as it is a story involving selfish and or greedy people. To be fair though, as far as a lot of people are concerned, myself included, there isn't much else to Rand's way of thinking. It's inherently a philosophy of selfishness. The idea that a person can only really be great through following their own desires to the detriment of all else is certainly present in the game. Tenenbaum appeals to your altruistic side in order to free the little sisters, but she's still using you. Ryan, Rapture's Randian hero, when finally encountered, reveals that you're just a pawn. He presents you with a golf club and tells you a man chooses, a slave obeys. He straight up explains to you that Atlas has been exploiting you the whole time through a form of hypnotic suggestion, and Ryan uses this to display your complete lack of choice. He orders you to cave his head in, which you do without hesitation. This scene is the most iconic in the game, and the one that people point to in order to convey just how powerful this game is as a piece of art. But it flies in the face of what you're led to believe its central theme is supposed to be. It suddenly makes the game about something else. At this point, it veers closer to being a study of free will than anything else. But even that doesn't really work, because the idea of free will can't be constrained to a binary good or evil progress bar. Why isn't the player allowed to remain on neutral terms with the big daddies at all times? The inclusion of the triggering phrase removes all notion of free will, so why are you allowed to spare the little sisters at all? If Atlas wants you to harvest Adam so you can grow big and strong and kill your dad, why would the hypnotic suggestion allow you to take the altruistic route, but still, it's implied, compel you to fight a huge diver with a drill for an arm, thus risking injury and ultimate failure? It becomes very clear that "would you kindly" is just another get out of right in jail free card. It raises more questions than it answers. So really, the game is about nothing. It just has little nods to ideas far too complex for such a limited design. Bioshock 2 is a special case. It's a game that's so boring and annoying to play that it was impossible to focus on or care at all about the narrative intent in amongst the countless wave combat point defense sections. While the actual combat mechanics have improved, the repetitive nature of the gameplay and the pace of the game make it a total drag. And it really doesn't help that almost nothing has changed in the settings. You're still in Rapture. Oh, but this time, you're a Big Daddy. So now you get to drill people to bits. And aside from the drill and an obnoxiously intrusive helmet frame for the HUD, there isn't much else to suggest that you're a giant mutant diver. You're in a massive, heavy suit loaded with huge weapons, yet the only time you feel you have any weight at all is the odd moment you step off a 6-inch rise and the game plays a canned, rumbling, thumping noise. Superficial tweaks to try and trick you into thinking you aren't just the same height and weight as any other FPS player character. Perfectly suits the series, really, when you think about it. All smoke and mirrors. So this time around the game thinks it's about collectivism. Sophia Lamb is the socialist agitator to counter Ryan's selfish ideals. How does the game convey these ideas? Through the usual dead drop audio recordings and a section where it literally takes you through a ride intended to explain Ryan's social theory. I guess you're expected to truly get an idea how diametrically opposed these two sides are from watching these mini animatronic plays, but of course this is a game, and the best way to get me to understand concepts in games is to make my actions relate in some way to the ideas at work, outside of pressing a button to play a tape. But in keeping with its uncanny aping of the first game, the main focus is still just the same binary moral choice built around the little sisters. It didn't work the first time, so why try it again when it has even less to do with the central theme? It isn't really about collectivism or Ayn Rand or any of that shite. It's actually about Eleanor Lamb and the connection that she has with Big Daddy Delta. It's a save the girl story, but with a bunch of pseudo-intellectual fluff padding it out. These games are like a stack of kids in a trench coat. All the appearance of something mature, but really it's just a bunch of little stupid idiots putting on a show. This lack of understanding of their own central themes carries all the way to Infinite. It ditches its obsession with race just a couple of hours in, making it all too clear that it only really existed as a means to emotionally manipulate players in the first place. Then you think, maybe it's about the cult of personality that is patriotism and delusional idealism. But then you realise that's all just a work too, a trick to get people to believe that there's more to this painfully dull game than vivisecting people with a crazy spinning contraption stuck to your arm. So what really is the main narrative thrust? Why, a convoluted multi-dimensional father-daughter romp, of course. As the game collapses in on its own sense of self-importance, we are treated to some of the most needlessly complicated sci-fi bullshit that Ken Levine could muster. I would have thought that at some point during the development process, the team would have asked him the question I find to be the most obvious. If we are making a completely by-the-numbers shooter here, why do you think all this pseudo-intellectual nonsense is going to fly? And when Levine couldn't answer, they should have just stuck the game in a big bin. Infinite is one of the most graceless, clumsy games I've ever played in terms of story, and it's a complete nothing in terms of gameplay. And yet it's a massive hit. Critics loved it, players loved it. Feels like I played a different game. How did anybody play the countless, tedious, dumbed-down combat sections, wander through the preachy dialogue sections, reach that bloody ending and think, this contrived blow-off is a perfect way to cap off a perfect story? It was all building to Elizabeth's becoming a trans-dimensional Deus Ex Machina. The ending makes very little sense, even from their simplified view that they take on multidimensional theory, as going back to one point in an infinite amount of realities doesn't ensure a definitive end to anything. If a branching path is created with every decision, there will always be a Comstock. Cutting one branch off of a tree doesn't make the tree conveniently disappear. And if there are infinite alternate reality equivalents of said tree, then it really is utterly redundant. Instead of actually making something cohesive, they just threw together a bunch of shit that was sure to sound impressive in press kits and biased bot reviews. But then people try to say that when you strip it all back, the game is actually about Booker and Elizabeth. It was about Booker working towards redemption and bonding with his estranged daughter. But you don't really know enough about either character to really connect with them in the early stages, and by the time you do know what's going on with them, their entire relationship has been reframed. Neither character really has a personality outside of what the plot demands from scene to scene as well. You slaughter so many people in your journey with Elizabeth that she rightly thinks you're a murderous maniac for a large portion of the game. She's a bit of a hypocrite though, really, considering she conjures turrets, manifests ammo caches, and throws you the health and items you need to enact your merciless slaughter. When you spend 90% of the game shooting people to bits because it's the only option it presents to you, it really doesn't sit well when a character that plays a part in your steady death march suddenly starts calling you a monster. There's a moment in Infinite that I think perfectly exemplifies this lack of cohesion that runs through the whole series. The genocidal duo make their way into a bar for a merciful break in the relentlessly boring action. There is inexplicably a guitar in the basement, and Booker sits down and begins to play a gentle tune while Elizabeth sings a short song. A somber little moment to potentially form a little bond together, make you care about the characters a bit more. And it really is just a moment. It lasts all of 60 seconds. Then you make your way out of the basement and immediately find your way to yet another fucking gunfight. This supposedly emotionally affecting scene is just another tiny blip in the steady hum of boring chaos you have to act out. I could picture Ken Levine nodding thoughtfully as he wrote this scene. I could see the furrowed brow of a man genuinely moved by something so completely meaningless. Until people start to understand how jarring it can be to have a scene like this thrust at you in the middle of what, for all intents and purposes, is just a mass murder simulator, the medium is never going to improve. All the self-congratulatory circle jerking in the industry, the games press included, can't actually cover up the fact that this shit is still laughably bad.